You ever look up at the night sky and just, I don't know, feel kind of overwhelmed by it all?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like this crazy mix of beauty and just vastness, makes you feel tiny, but also kind of connected to something much bigger.
It's a humbling experience, that's for sure.
Totally. Well, this deep dive, it's all about an article you guys sent in called The Cosmos in Verse. And get
Hmm.
this, it claims that thinking about the universe like poetry can help us understand it better.
That's right. And what's really fascinating about the article is how it challenges that common idea that science and art are like total opposites.
Right, because at first glance, the cosmos in verse, I mean, it sounds a little, I don't know, out there,
Yeah,
right?
I can.
Like, how can you possibly relate equations and sonnets?
Right.
But then the article starts talking about Einstein's equations, and it claims that physicists actually consider them works of art.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Those equations, they're so elegant, so simple, but they explain these incredibly complex truths about the universe.
So there's beauty in that.
Exactly. It's like finding the most concise, the most profound way to express something that's universally true.
So are they saying physicists are basically poets in disguise or something?
Not quite. But the article argues that poetry, with its focus on, things like rhythm and imagery and powerful language, it's really well suited to conveying that sense of awe that comes with scientific discoveries.
Okay, so I can see how that might make the science more, I don't know, relatable, maybe even more meaningful. But isn't there a risk that, I don't know, oversimplifying things?
Hmm, that's a good point. And it's something the article addresses.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it actually quotes the physicist Paul Dirac, who said that science tries to explain something new in a way everyone can understand, while poetry does the exact opposite.
Huh. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But the article pushes back on that idea, saying that poetry isn't just about obscuring meaning. It's about using language to create a more visceral, emotional connection to these complex ideas.
Okay, so it's not about replacing science with poetry. It's more about finding new ways to make the science resonate with us on like a deeper level.
Exactly.
I like that. Now, the article also mentions that this whole idea, it's not exactly new.
Right. It takes us back to the time of Galileo and Milton.
Okay.
And it points out that Milton's Paradise Lost, which is full of these cosmological references, actually reflects the scientific understanding of the universe back then.
Oh, interesting. So back then, the idea of like a scientist writing poetry or a poet referencing scientific concepts, it wasn't like weird or anything.
Not at all. In fact, the article mentions how even James Clerk Maxwell, the physicist who formulated the theory of electromagnetism, he dabbled in poetry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a well-rounded education back then included both the sciences and the arts. It was all part of being a learned person.
That's so fascinating. Makes you wonder why we started seeing these fields as so separate.
It's a great question. One we'll definitely delve into a bit later. But for now, let's get back to this concept of the cosmos in verse. You mentioned it was an article, but it's also the title of a book, right?
Yeah, and according to the article, this book tries to tell the story of the universe's origin, but through poetry. It's like a modern creation myth,
Right.
but grounded in science.
That's a great way to put it. It's trying to capture that grandeur, that awe of the universe's beginning, not through dry technical language, but through a poetic narrative that speaks to our shared human experience.
Okay, so I'm definitely intrigued now. So how does this book actually do that? Does it just like take a bunch of science facts and make them rhyme?
It's a bit more sophisticated than that.
Yeah.
The book is structured like a cosmic journey, unfolding in 3 acts. The first act focuses on the basic building blocks of the universe, the elements that make up everything around us.
Okay, so it starts small, like literally at the atomic level. What?
Yeah. Well, the second act, it expands outwards, exploring the grand structures of galaxies, the vastness of space. And finally, the third act tackles the ultimate question, the origin of the universe itself.
It's like that Carl Sagan quote, "We are made of store stuff."
Oh, absolutely.
There's something so poetic about that, like that idea that we're all connected to the cosmos in this really fundamental way.
And that's exactly what this book is getting at, conveying that sense of connection, that sense of wonder. It uses poetry not just to explain the science, but to evoke the emotional response that comes with thinking about these ideas.
So it's about getting us to feel the science, not just like understand it
Yeah,
intellectually.
exactly.
Okay. This is really making me think about like how we approach learning and understanding in general. What if we could apply this idea of using poetry to illuminate science to other fields?
Hmm.
Could it help us understand complex topics in history or economics, even politics, in a more meaningful way?
That's brilliant. I think you've hit on something really important there. It's not just about the specific connection between poetry and cosmology. It's about the the bigger idea that sometimes the most effective way to grasp a complex truth is to approach it from multiple angles.
Right. Like let different disciplines inform and enrich each other.
Exactly.
I love that. It's like breaking down these artificial barriers between different fields of knowledge,
Mhm.
and discovering new connections that we never would have seen before.
And in doing so, we open ourselves up to a much richer, a more nuanced understanding of the world.
Okay, so we've talked about how poetry can help us understand science, but the article also flips the script, right?
Right.
And says poetry can actually enhance the way we think about science itself. So how does that work?
Well, think about what makes good poetry. It's about using language in a very precise way, evocative, choosing the perfect words to convey a specific meaning and emotion. And the way science strives for a similar kind of elegance and precision.
So you're saying that scientists are like poets when they craft their equations and theories, like they're looking for the most elegant, most concise way to express a truth about the universe.
Exactly. The article points out that both poetry and science value clarity, conciseness, and a certain aesthetic appeal. It's not just about getting the information across. It's about doing it in a way that's intellectually satisfying and aesthetically pleasing.
So it's like both fields are striving for beauty, whether it's through words or through equations.
Precisely. And by recognizing those shared values, we can start to break down those artificial barriers we've created between the humanities and the sciences.
It makes me think about how we educate students. What if we encouraged more, I don't know, interdisciplinary learning? Where students could explore the connections between science and art or history and technology and so on.
Imagine students learning physics by reading poetry about the cosmos, or studying history through the lens of art and literature.
Right. It'd be a much more holistic and engaging way to learn.
Absolutely. It's about fostering a sense of curiosity and wonder that goes beyond any single discipline.
And by doing so, we might just inspire the next generation of thinkers and creators, those who can bridge these divides and come up with truly innovative solutions to the challenges we face.
Well said.
Now, I know we have a lot more to unpack from this article, including some really interesting ideas about cosmology and particle physics. So let's take a quick break and we'll dive back in right after this.
It really is amazing,
Hmm.
to consider how these fields that seem so separate can actually enhance each other.
It is. And speaking of things that seem separate, the article goes on to talk about cosmology, like the study of the universe as a whole,
Right.
and how it intersects with particle physics, the study of the tiniest bits of matter. That feels like a pretty big jump going from the vastness of space to the subatomic realm.
It might seem like a leap,
Mhm.
but it's actually very natural. After all, everything in the universe, I mean, from stars and planets to us, is ultimately made up of these tiny particles.
So, to understand the big picture, the universe as a whole, we need to understand the smallest pieces that make it up.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that cosmology is actually pushing the boundaries of what we know about particle physics.
Really?
Yeah, there are these mysteries out there like dark matter and dark energy, things we can only begin to unravel by studying the universe on a grand scale.
Okay, so walk me through this. How does studying something as vast as the universe help us understand these tiny invisible particles?
Well, take dark matter, for example. We can't see it directly, but we know it's out there because of its gravitational effects on galaxies. By observing how galaxies rotate and move within clusters, we can kind of infer the presence of this unseen matter.
So it's like we're detectives looking for clues about something we can't directly observe.
That's a great way to put it. And it's the same with dark energy. We know that the expansion of the universe is accelerating, and we attribute that acceleration to this mysterious force called dark energy. But we still don't really know what it is or where it comes from. Cosmology is giving us a way to study these fundamental mysteries on a scale that wouldn't be possible in a lab.
So the universe itself becomes like a giant laboratory for particle physics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where concepts like inflation and string theory come into play.
Oh, okay.
Remember, inflation's the idea that, like, in the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang, the universe expanded at this unimaginable speed, far faster than the speed of light.
Yeah, that always seemed a little crazy to me, faster than the speed of light.
I know, it's hard to wrap your head around. But this theory helps explain why the universe looks the way it does today, you know? Like why it's so smooth and uniform on a large scale.
Okay, so inflation helps us understand the very early universe. But how does string theory fit into all of this?
Well, string theory tries to go even deeper. It proposes that the fundamental building blocks of the universe aren't point-like particles, but these tiny vibrating strings. And these strings are so small, they're far beyond our current ability to observe them directly.
So it's like each particle is a tiny string instrument, and the way it vibrates determines its properties, like whether it's an electron, a quark, or something else.
That's, that's a really creative way to think about it. What's exciting about string theory is that it has the potential to unify all the forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces, all into this single, elegant framework.
So it's like the ultimate theory of everything.
It's certainly a contender. But here's where it gets even more interesting in terms of the cosmos in verse. These concepts, inflation, string theory, dark matter, dark energy, they're not just dry scientific ideas. They're mind-boggling concepts that spark our imagination and push us to think about the universe in new ways.
And that's where the poetry comes in. It gives us a way to express the wonder, the awe that these concepts evoke, a way to connect with them on a deeper, more emotional level.
Exactly. Just like the article argued that Einstein's equations have this artistic beauty, these cosmological concepts, they lend themselves to poetic interpretation too.
Hmm.
Imagine like a poem that captures the feeling of the universe inflating at unimaginable speed, or the idea that everything is made up of tiny, vibrating strings. It could be a really powerful way to communicate these ideas.
It's like using poetry to bridge the gap between this abstract world of theoretical physics and our human experience of, wonder and awe.
Precisely. And in doing so, we might even inspire new ways of thinking about these concepts, new avenues of scientific inquiry.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the benefits of connecting science and poetry, but I'm also curious about the challenges. The article mentions this divide between the humanities and the sciences. Why do you think that divide exists?
Well, there are a lot of factors, some historical, some cultural, even institutional. For centuries, there was this perception that the humanities and the sciences were just fundamentally different ways of knowing. The humanities were seen as dealing with subjective experiences, emotions, interpretations, while the sciences were all about objective facts, measurable data.
So it was like two different languages, two different ways of seeing the world.
Exactly. And this separation was often reinforced by educational systems that divided students into, like, science people and arts people, as if you had to choose one path or the other. But the cosmos in diverse, it challenges that notion, arguing that the humanities and sciences have a lot more in common than we often realize.
They both require creativity, curiosity, and a desire to understand the world, right?
Exactly. Think about the process of scientific discovery. It often starts with a question, a sense of wonder, a desire to solve a mystery. Those are qualities that are just as important in the arts and humanities.
And the humanities can bring new perspectives to scientific inquiry. Think about the ethical implications of scientific advancements. That's something philosophers and ethicists can really help us grapple with.
Absolutely. The humanities help us understand the human impact of scientific discoveries, how they shape our lives and societies. It's a two-way street. The sciences can inform and inspire the humanities, and the humanities can provide context and meaning to scientific inquiry.
The cosmos in verse seems to be arguing for a more integrated approach to knowledge, one where we break down those artificial barriers between
Yeah.
disciplines and really see the connections. It's a beautiful idea, but I have to ask, is it realistic? Can we really bridge this divide after centuries of separation?
I think it's absolutely possible. And in fact, it's already happening in a lot of fields. We're seeing more and more interdisciplinary research where scientists are collaborating with artists, writers, philosophers to tackle complex problems.
So it's not just about appreciating the beauty of a poem about the cosmos. It's about recognizing the practical value of bringing different perspectives together.
Exactly. By embracing this kind of interdisciplinary thinking, we might unlock solutions we never would have found working within just one discipline.
This conversation has been so thought-provoking. I'm like already looking at the world differently, seeing these connections I hadn't noticed before. What about you? What resonated most with you from this deep dive?
For me, it's that reminder that knowledge isn't confined to these neat little boxes. It's this vast interconnected web, and the more connections we make, the richer our understanding becomes.
That's a great point. This has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive so far, and I'm eager to hear what the article's ultimate message is. Do you think it offers any practical advice on how we can, like, bridge this divide between the humanities and the sciences in our own lives?
That's a great question, and one that I think the article's conclusion will shed some light on. Let's let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and then dive back into this fascinating exploration.
Welcome back. This whole concept of the cosmos in verse, it's really stuck with me. We've talked about how science and poetry, they've been connected throughout history, how they can benefit each other. Even how looking at the universe through a more poetic lens could help us solve some of its biggest mysteries.
It has been a pretty amazing journey, hasn't it? And now, as we get to the final part of this article, I'm really interested to see what conclusions it draws from all of this.
Me too. Does it, like, offer any practical advice on how we can bridge this divide between the humanities and the sciences?
Well, it doesn't like lay out a step-by-step plan or anything, but it does leave us with a pretty powerful message. It suggests that both poetry and physics, even though they have different approaches, they're ultimately driven by the same human desire.
Oh, okay. A shared desire for what?
A desire to understand the deepest truths about existence. Poetry might use metaphors and imagery to evoke that awe and wonder of the cosmos. And physics uses equations and experiments to try and unveil its underlying laws.
But ultimately, they're both trying to answer some of those same fundamental questions, right? Like, where do we come from? Where are we going? What's our place in all of this?
Exactly. And the article argues that by recognizing this shared purpose, we can start to break down these barriers we've built between these fields. It's not about saying one approach is better. It's about recognizing that they can work together,
Yeah.
complement and enrich each other.
So it's not just about, like, appreciating a nice poem about the cosmos. It's about recognizing that that poem might actually give us a new way of understanding scientific concepts.
Right.
And the other way around too, right? Maybe studying physics can deepen our appreciation for the poetry of the universe.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the article even suggests that this kind of interdisciplinary thinking, it might even lead to new discoveries,
Yeah.
new scientific discoveries and new forms of artistic expression.
Wow, that's a really interesting thought. Can you give an example of what that might look like?
Sure. Imagine a scientist who's really struggling to wrap their head around a complex problem. Maybe they turn to poetry,
Hmm.
to the use of metaphor and imagery as a way to kind of think about the problem differently. Or maybe a poet inspired by the latest discoveries in cosmology creates a work of art that not only captures the beauty of the universe,
Right.
but also sparks new questions for scientists to explore.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. It's like we're opening up these new channels of communication between fields that, traditionally haven't really talked to each other that much.
Exactly. And the article suggests that this kind of cross-pollination, it's essential if we really want to understand the universe and our place in it.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking. I'm already starting to see the world a little differently, noticing connections I hadn't really seen before. What about you? What really resonated with you from this deep dive?
For me, it's just that reminder that knowledge doesn't fit into neat categories. It's all connected. And the more connections we make, the more we understand.
That's a great takeaway, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. So, to all of you listening out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking for those unexpected connections.
Whether it's through science, poetry, art, or anything else that sparks your curiosity, just remember that search for knowledge and meaning, it's a journey. And it's best undertaken with an open mind and a sense of wonder.
And who knows, maybe by embracing that wonder, you'll uncover a connection that changes the way you see the world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Cosmos verse. We'll catch you next time.